Wasn't long till I got my fill for the pills. Little here and there to help with the way I feel. Now I can't slow it down and I don't sleep. And I've been feeling partial to the company I keep. Turns out they ain't helping me at all. It's 3 down the pipe and I feel myself start to fall.
There we go. All right, what's up? I'm Ben. I'm an addict. So, I guess we should start at the beginning. I was born in '84 in right near San Diego, California. I don't remember it. I think I lived there about 6 months. So my dad was in the Navy, so we kind of just like toured the coasts throughout my childhood. What happened first? I think the earliest memory I have is sitting in the back seat of the car, and I really had to pee, and I just couldn't bring myself to like inconvenience anybody to tell them that I needed to stop and go to the bathroom. I don't know why that one stuck with me. I think I was 4 or 5 years old, but it really like crystallized in my mind, I guess, and it kind of shows a real pattern that would emerge in my life. Just not wanting to inconvenience anybody in like early childhood. I guess I had anxiety. I don't know. I didn't know what that was at the time. I just kind of, it was like, I did good at school and everything. I was able to get really good grades without really trying much, but I never really, I didn't feel great about it or anything. It was good. It kept everybody happy at home when I was making good grades. But I had this ingrained need to escape. And to escape like into something comfortable. So naturally, like, we didn't always have cable TV or anything, and so I was into reading. I remember like just that feeling of escaping into a good fiction book, especially if it was like somewhere that didn't exist, some kind of fantasy or something like that. So that's the first indication I think I had of like just this need to escape. And I didn't put that together at the time. I just knew I liked reading books more than I liked being around regular humans and existing, And so, we moved around, I think, at least once every grade in my first few years of school. So my parents are both from Texas, from East Texas, so like we ended up near Houston at like a Navy base or something. And then we went to Rhode Island. That's where my first sister was born. I don't remember much about Rhode Island. It was really cold, but not so you couldn't stand it. Like, people knew to dress correctly in Rhode Island. I've realized now that like I get colder here in Alabama for some reason, and I think it's based on that I don't know how the weather's going to be every day. But I remember being in naval housing. So it's like up there in Rhode Island, it was like this street and apartment buildings on both sides, and there were just kids of all different flavors. You know, all of our neighbors, you had anybody you could want on that street. And so from really early on, my parents were, you know, they were all about being accepting and being loving of humans, you know, just accepting and loving people for who they were. And that's one of the things they really got right, and that really stuck with me. You know, they had their problems. I'll get there, but anyway, my first sister was born there. Second sister was born back in Texas, and those were the only two I had for a while. So what did I do? I don't remember ever. I was never like rebellious, like openly rebellious. But as it got more like where my dad was gone all the time because he was in the Navy, he was overseas. You know, I'd kind of like make justifications in my brain, and this is something that I'm working on still. I wouldn't openly rebel against what my mom was telling me or what my dad was telling me. I would just kind of like find myself making these justifications in my mind for why I could break the rules, or how it wasn't really breaking the rules. And so I guess I was raised in like a, let's see, Pentecostal-ish church. That was kind of the flavor that they were into, or that I guess that my mom was into. And that really like it kind of like instilled this fear of God, fear of immediate punishment from God, things like that. Wasn't, you know, I guess everybody's trying to do their best, but it wasn't my favorite flavor of God. And but you know, I went and I did the thing, and I, you know, believed what I was supposed to believe or whatever, and I was like, got that box checked off. And you know, just kind of lived making deals with God about rules a lot throughout my childhood. As I got a little bit older, you know, I was like, well, we're good, but I'm gonna go do this, and you know, I'll be back or whatever. So I don't know. I was just kind of in like an impossible to please kind of relationship with God, because I guess I thought that was what I was supposed to do. Anyway, let's see. We ended up in, I guess when I got to high school, at one point my dad decided after he got out of the Navy that he was going to be a preacher. It it was weird. So we kind of like, he was gonna like travel around and do revivals or whatever, and I think at the second place we went to, we ended up stuck there for several years. You know, him filling in as like a pastor there. So it was me and two sisters and my mom and dad. We were in a like a 30-something foot camper living out behind the church, and that was miserable, especially for, you know, 13-year-old boy, because you know, I had things going on up in my brain that you didn't like to think about with your sisters around in the same room, and so that was really weird. And the church was like in the projects, which I thought was just like amazing because there was all these people around like all the time, and there was like woods behind the church that I could go play in if I didn't want to be around people. And I think that was, yeah, I just thought about it. That's the first place I ever like encountered drugs as a physical thing. uh, I found one of those little metal, kind of looks like a metal pill bottle, but it's really, really skinny. uh, Apparently it had coke in it, and like I just found it out in the field behind the projects, and I picked it up, and it had like a, residue in it, and I smelled it. I was like, this smells kind of funny. And I had no clue. uh, so anyway, my dad, told me what it was, and he was like, we gotta wash that out, and then you can play with it or whatever. uh, kind of should have been a Kind of should have made me think for a minute that he knew what coke smelled like. I didn't even check up at that fact. uh, you know that never crossed my mind, like, why does he know? uh, but he had been in the Navy and overseas, and come to find out, had done a few drugs in his life. um, so all this time, I mean, since we're on him, he was like full on dry alcoholic mode, like not cool to be around. uh, I remember one like really traumatic, I say it's traumatic to me anyway, event was like when we were moving the camper the first time, and trying to get it parked at this church. And like I'm out here trying to put these jack stands, down so we can level it out, and he just like goes insane about I'm not doing it right or something. And I'm just like, he's supposed to be a preacher, and he's just like, biting my head off about something stupid here. I don't understand. There's something that doesn't add up here, and I didn't know anything about alcoholism at the time. So let's see. Let's go back a few years. That's not the first traumatic thing I remember. The first traumatic thing I remember was so I guess I should say first that my dad's like a child of a really super abusive, crazy person who like, put cigarettes out on him when he was a baby and that kind of stuff, to give you a picture. So he's doing the best with what he's got at this point. The fact that I was never physically abused is like a miracle. But there was a lot of like unintentional abuse, like mentally. And I have a lot of compassion for the guy now that I'm a parent, because like like some days I get it. It's probably not the greatest thing to say it, but sometimes you want to hit your kids. It's like the natural reaction. You just want to slap them and tell them to act right. But so the first really traumatic experience I remember is like I had on the back of these Rice Krispie cereal boxes, you could save up the box things, and you get this little Matchbox car. And I had saved up, 5 of them or however many, and I set them on the little thing where all the bills and stuff sit, and went to bed or whatever. And then I guess at some point that weekend, my dad cleaned up and threw them away. And so I, naturally, I was probably 9 or 10 years old, maybe. I freaked out and was crying about it and everything. And my mom was fussing at him because he's real bad about just like cleaning up. And his version of cleaning up is like, if he doesn't know what it's for, it's gone. Especially if it's a piece of paper. and so he got the garbage can that still had all the stuff in it and just like dumped it out in front of me on the kitchen table. And like this whole time I'm just like learning this response. This is what happens when I express my feelings about something. When I talk about my feelings or when I need something, something bad happens. Somebody freaks out, usually my dad. And so like that, I think that was a defining moment. I was like, I don't know if I thought it that clearly at the time, but there was something in me that said, all right, it would be a lot easier for me if I just like didn't have feelings about stuff in front of people. If I didn't need things, everybody else would be good. So if we go back to let's see, that church that we ended up at in the projects, he stayed there for a couple of years. We were homeschooling, which was an adventure all its own. And then eventually his career as a preacher was just like, this isn't doing it. And so he had always wanted to be a police officer, and there was a kind of bigger city about 20 minutes from where we were, so he decided that that's what he was going to do. He had, military training or whatever, so it was pretty easy for him to get on, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And for a minute he was happy. He was doing something that was fulfilling him, so he was happy, which meant we could be happy. And let's see. So we moved around a little bit while he was going to police academy, and we finally moved to the town where he was going to be a police officer at. And I actually got a house with rooms and everything, which was amazing. And so, I don't know if anybody knows a police officer, but they tend to work, they have a shift, but stuff always happens and makes those shifts go on longer. And police officers are kind of naturally like don't want to talk about a lot of stuff that goes on at work, so he kind of had his own thing there. And meanwhile I was starting an actual high school, which was eye-opening because I didn't know anything about drugs. Had never had a drink besides like accidentally picking up my dad's beer bottle when I was little. But as my dad got away from the church, like little things started showing up that like I would find out about, because I think it was the first summer after that first year at high school. I'm looking around for like Christmas presents or something in their bedroom and find like 2 packs of cigarettes in his work boots, like stuffed down in there, which like I was like, that changed my life. I was like, he's not supposed to smoke, like this is awful. What is going on here? And then some nights when he would get home, I knew what beer smelled like. I could smell it on him, and I was just like, my mom's gotta know, but if she's okay with it, then I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna rock the boat. And just kind of continued to build that response in me to keep secrets in order to not bother anybody. So eventually some point during that summer, uh, my mom's working at a daycare center every day to try to, help us keep up with the bills and everything. And meanwhile, like, my dad's having these really long phone conversations on the porch, and I'm like, what's going on? What? Nobody talks on the phone. I don't talk on the phone this much, and I'm like 14. And so I had this little red button phone in my bedroom, and I could like pick it up and hold onto the little switch and cover up the mic on it, and then like slowly let the switch up to where I could listen and nobody would know I'd picked it up. And so, like, in bits and pieces, because I couldn't take the trauma response I would have every time, like, I would pick it up and listen in. I'd like have to hang it up because I can't handle this. Found out he was talking to some lady that I don't know, and like I didn't hear anything specific. I just heard him talking to a lady, and pretty much filled in the rest from there. And so I'm like, 14 years old, I'm faced with what do I do with this information? Because, my dad's, like, despite what flaws he does have, he's like he's like the strong, like, bedrock in my life. Like, he's the thing that's solid, that's there. He's like if I ever got the nerve up to ask anybody a question, he would be the person. And so I'm just like sitting with this information and trying to find a way to deny it or make it not be there, and just kind of I just kind of like pushed it aside every day, for a while. And, hearing things, because my bedroom was right by the porch, so I could hear him talking on the phone, and I would hear things that I didn't want to hear and just kind of like shut down and, go escape into one of the Chronicles of Narnia books or something like that. That was a big staple at that time, was the Narnia books. And I had like some flamenco guitar music on a CD that I would listen to on repeat, just kind of with the volume up where I couldn't hear it. And it was about that same time that I started to learn guitar. Was really helpful, I think, for me to get feelings out through just like banging away at this little cheap electric guitar I had. I had this little tiny amp that it had distortion on it, so you could turn the distortion way up and just play some loud punk rock or something and just, get all those feelings out. But anyway, I used whatever I had at my disposal just to like numb those feelings. And, if I didn't have some way to escape, I would just kind of like, I don't know, I had this ability to just turn it all off and just kind of like zone out in my brain sometimes. It's useful, but it's a really bad coping skill later on in life. Because I'll zone out when I'd need to actually take some action. So anyway, all of his whole situation came to a head one night, and like I said, my bedroom's like right on the edge of the porch and the driveway, so one night he's gone to work, and the chief calls our house to ask him if he can come into work, which was problematic. And so my mom's like, I'm sure she knew, because she's like me. She just like picks up on things, and knows stuff she'd rather not know a lot of the time, and is a she's the person I get my people pleasing and codependency skills from. Uh, but anyway, now she's got to do something about it and say something about it, and so when he finally gets home, he pulls up and she's out in the driveway, and I hear her slap him, and I don't know what it was about that. Like, I can still hear it in my brain. It's just like, it's like my whole, everything I knew about like love and what family was just kind of started to crumble there. And he came up with some kind of excuse, like he just needed to go somewhere to sit and think by himself or something like that. Something I would come up with to use later on, when you're trying to get out of what were you doing when you went to buy drugs. It's kind of the same skill. But anyway, so, the next day he calls us all in the living room, and he's openly drinking a beer in the living room, which was like that was like a high water mark, I think, when I knew like everything's different now. But anyway, it continued on, and whatever, he ended up went away for a little bit, stayed somewhere else for a couple weeks or something. I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't talk to my friends about it or anything. I just continued to just keep everything inside. I promise this will get to drugs eventually. It's mostly like emotional damage so far. So, what else? So we were going to church, and at a different church. I think it was like just a non-denominational church at that point. And I actually had like a group of friends there, and I had this guy that me and him would play music all the time. And so thankfully, like he started introducing me to like some classic rock stuff, because his dad had been in a classic rock band back in the 70s, and me and him kind of like started trading back what we knew about music and how to play guitar and stuff. And I'll be like forever indebted to that guy, because I was just about done with guitar, just because like I wasn't getting anywhere and we didn't have YouTube. But I'd finally found like a person that was usually there, that wanted to hang out and like have fun and stuff, and so that was really cool. That's like the first best friend I guess I had that really lasted. His parents were special too. His mom has borderline personality disorder, and his dad's a people pleaser. So it's like it was kind of the flip of my parents' situation. But anyway, what happened next? Oh, so I told you my family was always about about loving people, regardless of what they look like or whatever. And my family's like the type to take in strays and things like that. We always, like, throughout my whole childhood, we'd have people come in and stay in that their family didn't want them there or whatever. And so it was this one girl from church that got pregnant, and her parents didn't want her around. She got pregnant by a black dude anyway, and they weren't cool with that. And so she started staying with us, and stayed at our house throughout the entire pregnancy, and then we adopted the baby, which is my littlest sister, Amy. And she's So that was what year? 2000, I think. Uh, and that was amazing because like I think it probably it's her fault we're still all together as a family, like because we all had this like this human that we all had to kind of straighten up and raise this kid, despite the fact that I did drop her on the floor once. Uh, so anyway, if finally all the cheating stuff came out, and we decided to pull a geographic and move back up. Yeah, back up here where we live now. Uh, so my dad got a job at the city police department up here. Uh, so me and my three sisters, we all had each other, and that was about it. I didn't know anybody up here uh, that went to my school anyway, and so let's try to fast forward this a little bit. In, I guess 10th grade, we started this band with some friends of mine from marching band, and so the drummer's the mayor's kid, and his mom's the mayor, and she's really cool because she'll let him get like some wine coolers every once in a while out of the fridge downstairs in the garage, and it's kind of like just this unspoken thing, like just do it at the house and don't drink a lot of it or whatever. And so it's so weird. Like I would obsess about when we got to his house, were we gonna get to, have something to drink. And like we never got drunk. We never drank more than like one each. But it was just like this thought that there's something there, like there's something special about this. And like I guess I got like a tiny buzz one of those times off of it, and just like I was like, can't go crazy here because this is the mayor's house, but one day like this is going to require some more research. And we would go like to their lake house or whatever, and we'd be limited to like a 6-pack between the four of us, so it wouldn't really ever work out for me. But that was like that should have told me something, I think, now that I look back on it. But what, I didn't know anything about obsession and stuff like that. So anyway, we had fun playing in a band. We didn't ever do anything groundbreaking or whatever. We just had a lot of fun. And at some point, I guess it was about 10th or 11th grade, I met the lady that I'm married to now. She comes into it later. But I guess we were dating about this time, and it was, I guess probably senior year. Woke up at like 3 o'clock one morning and just had this like intense tooth pain back in the back of my mouth. And, like, I mean, I thought I was dying. I had never felt anything like it. And I didn't know there was any kind of relief for it besides ibuprofen. And so I'm just like sitting up in my living room, suffering silently, not wanting to wake anybody up or bother anyone. And finally I went and got my dad. I was like, look, I'm dying. I don't know what to do, And so he goes and gets a, I guess Vicodin, whatever. Norco, whatever you want to call it, and gives me like a half of a 5 milligram one. And that changed my life entirely. Like from that, about 10 minutes in to after I took it, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is the answer. Like, not just to what's going to make me feel better right now. This is like how normal people must feel. Like, this feels like the ultimate comfortable, if that makes sense. Like that was kind of what I always wanted through all the escaping through books and numbing out and escaping through music, was like just to kind of be comfortable for a few minutes. And like this little half of a pill just like did it like that, you know. And so, you know, I went and got the tooth fixed early that morning, and they gave me a bottle of them. And you know, I didn't I didn't go all out or anything. I wanted it to kind of last, because I wanted that feeling to last as long as it could. So I kind of just like took them as prescribed, but took it till the bottle was empty, you know, after the pain wasn't there anymore. I was like, this is good. And then I ran out and just kind of forgot about it, because, like, you know, I didn't know anything about them. I just knew that there were these mysterious magical pills that just showed up one day. And so let's see. Let's fast forward a little bit. Got engaged to my wife. I guess I was 21. Or no, got married at 21. That's it. And you know, finally had the ability to just like buy alcohol straight up without having to go through any hoops or anything. And so, you know, on our honeymoon, it was like, yeah, get some alcohol like every day. And I thought it was weird that she didn't want to drink like the whole time. I was like, we got nothing, no responsibilities. We're up in the mountains. Like, you know, why wouldn't you? But anyway, let's see. A few years in, I meet this friend while I'm working at Walmart that introduces me to weed, because like I never had any kind of connection or anything to get that kind of stuff. And that one was really fun. Never had a really bad experience with that one. It made music cooler. It made movies amazing. It made sitting down and just like eating ice cream the coolest thing in the world. And I think that's important to say, that like drugs were pretty cool and they kind of worked for a while. And of course comes a point where they didn't, but so I didn't ever have any problem or any consequences come from that. And then eventually I'm working at this hardware store, and this kid that works in the lumber yard out back, he's got like the hookup for pills. And so naturally, me and him become friends. And I start kind of, using them as often as I can afford them. And meanwhile, we got a baby on the way. And Jesus, it's 9:45. I'm going to break the record. Because we're not even started yet. So the day comes that my wife's going into labor, and like I wake up with a really bad headache and take like there were these little Darvocet. That's what they were called. They were pink. They were awful. They didn't really even work, but they kind of did. And so I took like a handful of those because I was like, I got to drive her to the hospital, and ended up getting really sick from them and like puked all over the bushes outside the front of the maternity ward on the way in. That was classy. And then ended up, the migraine got worse and just like ended up laying on a couch most of the day until after lunchtime, right about the time that, you know, she started really having to push and stuff. So anyway, first baby's born. That's a whole thing. That's, you know, if you know what that's like, you know what it's like. I can't describe it. It's another one of those things that completely turns your entire world around and should shift your priorities. Didn't really. It did for a minute, and on most things except for, you know, I was still going to take my pills whenever I wanted to. And let's see, I got a new job finally, working for the world's largest and oldest telecommunications company. I'll just leave it at that because I still work there somehow. And so this job is installing TV and internet service in people's houses, making really good money for it. I remember the first time that I like came in close daily contact with a real active alcoholic was during training for this job. Like, this guy didn't show up the first day for training because his tires were flat or something, and then was late every morning for training because he was completely just wasted that night before. And he didn't make it through the second week. But that guy, like, I was like, what is this guy's deal? Like, his life is completely just upside down. How can you be this bad at just getting to training? All you gotta do is sit in a classroom. And I didn't know about that unmanageability part yet. So let's see, first couple of weeks working at this job, I'm upstairs. There's two of us because one guy's training me, and he's working downstairs and he's talking to the customer, and I'm upstairs putting this TV box in, and there's this, 120 milliliter bottle of golden magnificent cough syrup, and I seen it. I was like, I know what that is, and it's this Tussinex. If you know what that is, you know. It's like a 12-hour time release. It's perfect. But so I was like, this is a landmark because I'm fixing to like steal something. Like, this goes against like everything I was taught, everything all the stuff that I took from what I was taught and kept. Like, this is one of my things that I don't do. And I was like, it took me no time to justify it and be like, they're not even gonna appreciate it. They don't know what they have here. They're just like sick. And so I took my Mountain Dew bottle and poured about half of it in there, and then like filled it back up with a little bit of water and shook it up real good, and felt great the rest of the day. And that opened up like an entire world of possibilities because I was in so many different houses every day, and so many people had narcotics just like sitting there. And so like, my manipulation skills went like through the roof doing that, because I would have to find ways to get them out of this room where I know there's something in here, or find a way to make an excuse to go in that room, all this kind of stuff. And like I got really good at it and did it for several years. And then so eventually, as it must happen, I got caught by this lady, but not like in the act. So I took some stuff. She had like a fresh giant bottle of hydrocodone or something, and I took 15, not enough to make a big dent. And so apparently she later on that night like organized her month's worth of pills or something, and the count wasn't right. And I was the only person that had been there, and I had been right in that room right beside him. So she calls me the next morning. I'm off work and at home because naturally I was a good technician. I left my number with her in case she had any trouble. And she calls me and she's like, "Look, I know what you did. What's going on? Why would you do that?" Like, and I don't know, I came up with some excuse about having a bad headache or something. She's like, "You took more than you would take for a headache." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't really thinking straight or something." Anyway, I was like, "Look, just do me a favor. If you're going to call the company, just tell me." And she's like, "Well, I'm going to think about it and I'm going to pray for you. And I'll let you know if I decide to do that." And I never heard back from her. And I was like, after about a month of sitting around on pins and needles and, worrying the whole time, I was like, okay, I guess she just let it go. And so that just like fueled my my belief that I was like special somehow, and that I wasn't going to get, that there was not going to be any consequence for any of this. And then the day came where I went into withdrawal for the first time because I didn't have anything. And like, oh my God, that changed the world again. Because like all of a sudden there's like an immediate and very obvious consequence that like the only thing I know to do about it is take more. And goodness, the days that I would suffer through, like it was almost like there was this like anti-higher power working for me. Because like, you go in dope sick to work in the morning and just be like, there's got to be something somewhere today. Like I didn't have any kind of connection to buy it from, except this one guy who every once in a while would come up with something. And like it was like willing these circumstances to come about where I would be able to get what I wanted and get better. And I mean it worked out most days, because I guess this was before they really started cracking down much on narcotic medication. But eventually, after a weekend where I took so many pills that weekend. I would snort them if I got something like without acetaminophen in it, but most of the stuff I would get was like full of Tylenol, so I'd just have to eat them. And after a weekend of like, going through like 160 pills or something, which is a incredible amount of acetaminophen for your liver to try to process, I was like, well, this isn't working. Like, this is miserable. Like, every aspect of my life is just me. Like, I don't want to, make anything bad for anyone else. So I'm like just treating all these anxieties and things and escaping, like, all the time. And so I'm never like present for anything. I was like, I didn't want to get clean, but I really didn't want to feel the way I was feeling about it anymore. Like, it was just like I never had, like, I never got arrested or anything. I never got any of those serious consequences somehow. My dad being a cop didn't hurt, but like, all the consequences were in here, and like, in my feelings. I was just like, I didn't have any hobbies anymore. I didn't really like playing guitar much. You know, I knew I loved my kids and my wife and stuff, but my wife was dealing with her own like depression stuff, which I completely kind of left out of this whole thing this time for some reason. But I had dealt with her suicidal ideations and stuff by just being numb, and there was a lot of kind of trauma around that I just kind of didn't ever look at. And later later on, I was like, she tried to kill herself, and like, I just kind of woke up the next day and went to work, and because that was like the only way I knew how to deal with these feelings and stuff. And so that day after that weekend, where I was like, if I'm taking this much in 2 days, like, this is, you can't keep it up. Like, it just doesn't, the math doesn't work out. I had money to buy stuff if I knew where to buy it, but I didn't know anything about scoring drugs anywhere. So I was just like, there's got to be something I can do. And so I'm like, I don't want to be on methadone, because that stuff, you got to go like every day and pick it up and stuff. And I got a job, so I was like, searched up, I don't know, opioid replacement therapy or something, because I didn't want to get clean. I just wanted to like have a way to make it work. And so Suboxone's naturally the obvious choice. And I'm not anti Suboxone, but like, my intention was never the right intention when I went in there to get that stuff. I was never interested in staying clean. I was just like, I gotta have a way to make this work. So, went to the doctor, did the whole thing, and for like 2.5, 3 years, like, it worked all right. I always had something to back up. Yeah, something as backup for any time like I didn't have anything else. I had this. And I actually, the first couple of years, I just kind of took it as prescribed, and it, life was fine. It wasn't great. I wasn't doing any kind of work on all this complex trauma stuff that I had that I didn't know anything about. And eventually, I think once I had somehow been put in charge of my wife's anxiety medicine to keep her safe from it, which was great. Like, of course I will. Yeah, I got it. And the day came where she needed some of it, and it wasn't there. So that kind of threw off some red flags. And I just told her the truth. I was really stressed, and I started taking it because it helped, which was entirely true, in its own way. And so, there were spurts of using here and there, and then eventually, like, so my daughter got on, what's it called, Concerta, which is like Ritalin, same stuff. And So it was only like a matter of time, like knowing that that was there. It was something that I was never really into, but I was like, it's there. And if it's there, that means it's mine. Uh, that was like my mindset when it came to my family's medication, extended family. If I was at your house, it was mine. Uh, and so eventually, you know, I'm taking this stuff, like, you know, breaking it down and snorting it or whatever, and uh, it's probably the most shameful part for me. The rest of it is just whatever. But I was essentially shorting my kids' medication, which, there's not a lot of physical withdrawals from it, but there's, she's expecting to have that because she needs it to just to focus and function at school. And I was the one in charge of giving it to her every morning, so I'd forget sometimes or whatever. And but eventually, of course, it came around to one morning my wife had to give her medicine, and it wasn't there. And and like I wasn't having any fun anymore. I was just like floundering, trying to just find something to fix me, and it wasn't working. And so she calls me. I'm on my way to work. She's like, "You're using again," and I'm like, "Yeah, no." Like I was so sick of just like hiding everything. I was like, "Yeah, you got me. Uh, what are we gonna do? What do you want me to do?" Because I didn't have any ideas. Uh, I certainly wasn't into asking for help. That was my whole MO through life, was just to like suffer in silence and not bother anybody. And what I didn't mention was like 2 years before this, my dad had went to rehab for obvious alcoholism. So I didn't really know much about it. I went to the family groups completely high, and which was interesting. And so my wife was like, you got to come home. You're not going to work today. I was like, all right. And then she calls me back. She's like, you got to go to your parents' house. I was like, all right. I guess I'm getting sent to my parents' house. And, that was frightening because, I'm 30 some odd years old at the time, but I'm still afraid of my dad, essentially. Just on like a visceral level, because he's bigger than me and he's always been bigger than me, and he never gave me a reason to be physically afraid of him, but for whatever reason, like I still kind of have that reaction. So I'm expecting like a big argument intervention type thing, and he's just like, well, tell me what's going on. I was like, he gave me a minute to just like explain what was going on, and he's like, what do you want to do about it? And I was like, I have no idea. I need to quit, but I don't know what I'm doing. I'm clueless about this thing. And so he's like, well, it's my opinion, you should probably go do something like what I did and do inpatient treatment. And I was not into that. I was like, don't they have like outpatient or something where I can keep going to work? I was using that like I wanted to go to work or something. And he's like, yeah, they got that too. Let's just he's like, well, I can call him for you and we can set up an appointment to talk to him. And of course, the minute I get there, like, and it's so weird, like, as I was telling him what was going on, I was still lying about it. Like, I was still making it not sound as bad as it was or whatever. And as soon as I got in the room with the counselor lady, I was like, she was like, so what, what all have you been doing? What are you on? And, I was like, you're not going to tell him any of this, are you? Because, like, I'm still the little kid, I don't want to disappoint people and make them feel bad. And, she's like, no, you're an adult, you're the patient here. And so finally, like, just had a person who wanted to help me that I could just tell all this stuff to. And I was like, I just told her everything. And she's like, yeah, you need to go to inpatient, like, if it's at all possible. And she's like, we'll call you back in a few hours if we have a bed open. And so, later on that night, I'm sitting on the smoking gazebo out behind it's like midnight by the time I get checked in. I'm sitting out there, with my little sketch pad, feeling all, romantically depressed about the whole situation. And, I'm going to just be this guy who's over here drawing by myself. And, what I didn't plan on, like, talking to anybody or anything. I was just like, I guess I'm just going to do this, whatever this is. I knew nothing about, 12-step fellowships or any sort of recovery, anything. I just knew, like, I'm getting off drugs, I guess. And, which I think was a good way for me to go into it, because I didn't have any hang-ups about any of that stuff. I was just like, I guess you guys are going to tell me what to do, because I don't know. And what was cool is, like, the first couple days, I'm, like, seeing the same guys in and out of detox, talking to the guys in the med lines or whatever, and, like, it's like these guys have the same thing I've got. And it's, we can sit here and laugh about all these people that I stole all their medication from, and that one dead guy who I got the fentanyl patches from out of his house. It's like, I never met anybody that I could say I stole some medicine from a dead guy and, like, they would laugh about it. So, started kind of opening up to people, and that connection started to form, and I started to kind of see I wasn't full detox yet, because I had been on Suboxone the whole time. So I was just kind of like waiting those 32 or however many hours for it to get out of my system before it really hit. But I saw some kind of hope, because I met all these people and we were all kind of in it together, and we could laugh with each other and have a little bit of fun. And it was miserable, it was detox, it's miserable, it's gonna be, but there's little glimmers, and we're sitting, watching the Andy Griffith Show, like I did back when I was 10 years old, trying to get to sleep, and start finding joy and stuff like that. So anyway, I stayed the whole 21 days. That, like, about halfway through, I called my wife and told her where the Suboxone was stashed at so she could flush it. Because naturally there was, like, a whole bottle in my backpack somewhere. And where the extra Klonopin was hidden up in the cabinet or whatever. And I think that was the point where I was really, like, starting to understand that, like yeah, I probably just need to, like, accept that I don't get to do drugs anymore. It's like I've had my fair share, I've used more than most people will in their life, and kind of got used to the idea that I don't have to do this anymore, I guess. Timeout. So, I had some really good counselors. I met some really good people, and like you do, I got everybody's phone number in my big book, that $30,000 copy, and I called one of them after I got out, so that's about average, and so. But by the time I got out, I had all the relapse prevention plan, and I was gonna go to IOP afterwards, and the main thing that I had been really intentional about was whenever I get out, the first day that afternoon or whatever, I'm going to a meeting somewhere, because I gotta. If I don't do it that first day, I'm not going to do it the next day either, and so I found this the smallest possible meeting you could ever imagine. There's 4 people at a old post office up in the ghetto, and I went there and I shared about what I was going through and listened to other people share, and this little old lady bought me or just gave me a hardback basic text, and she was like, "You can pay me back later on, just whenever you can." I never paid her back, but I did pay it forward to the next person, so I kind of consider that one done. But anyway, doing that the very first day, and setting that as knowing that about myself, that if I don't do it the first day, I'm not going to do it the next day. I dove into going to meetings. I got some rando temporary sponsor from somewhere an hour and a half away from my house, because we don't have meetings near the house, and called him once, got a sponsor somewhere else the next day, because it was too far. And anyway, just started going to meetings, and just kind of going to whatever fellowship I could, and just kind of listening and forcing myself to kind of share where I was at, and sharing that stuff. What was amazing is people would come up to me and talk to me afterwards and be like, I've been there, this is how it was for me, or whatever, telling me their story, how they felt when they got out. And I think it finally, I was doing the IOP, which is funny because the lady that was doing my dad's IOP when I was still getting high and I was going to the family groups was the lady that did my IOP. And it's 3 years later, I was like, "Hey, I know you." And she's still one of my favorite people that I know. She's she's not in recovery, she's just a counselor lady, but we're kindred spirits. She's just she's got a lot of the same things I do with the anxieties and the coping mechanisms. I think we're probably the same personality type, but anyway, the main thing was establishing relationships with people in the program, and for those first 30 days or so, that was it. That was I was just meeting people left and right, and most of them were pretty cool, and most of them wanted to talk to me. I didn't even have to really try at it. And I gotta say, I've heard some really bad horror stories of people first coming to the program in their city, and it's like terrible. And like I'm eternally grateful for like the Tuscaloosa area people. Like there's bad apples like there are anywhere, but like for the most part, they're all, you know, really cool and seem to be there for the right reasons, I guess. Uh, so, you know, I found a sponsor, started doing a little bit of reading on the first step. Then he relapses a couple weeks in, which was special. I really, you know, I was like, okay, I guess that happens, you know. And I had like this dread that, of course, one day it's inevitably going to be me next time or something, which I shared about last week. But so, you know, once he didn't call me and tell me he relapsed. He called me and told me he was too busy and that I should probably find somebody else. And he came back in a few weeks later into the meeting. I was like, hey, what's up? He's like, yeah, I relapsed. I'm like, yeah, I know. But anyway, so there was this one guy that was sponsoring several of my friends. And I was like, this guy's got it. Like, he's really on it. And, like, you could just tell, like, the dude, even when he was going through stuff, he had that spiritual connection. He was, like, plugged in, and his life was manageable. And, like, that was what I was looking for. So I was like, I'm asking this dude. He's going to be my sponsor, and that's going to be it. And, so I went up to him expecting him to say yes, obviously. And he's like, no, I kind of got enough people right now, but I know this one other guy that's sponsoring that would be really good. And that was his son, which I didn't know at the time. But and this kid, I say kid, he's younger than me. And he's, you know, still in college and stuff. And I see him walking up. He's like, I don't know, 6 foot some odd inches. He's got this like Beatles haircut going on. Really, he looks like one of the Beatles, and he wears like really bright colored basketball shoes and stuff. And he's like not somebody that I would just like gravitate towards in normal circumstances, but you know, I go up to him and I ask him about it, and he's like, well, are you willing to go to any lengths? I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess that's why I'm here. And he's like, well, cool, call me tomorrow. And, you know, I called him tomorrow. And called him every day, basically, for the first, I guess, 2.5 years, probably. You know, worked the steps. That was... You know, I hear a lot of people say that, you know, like they like going to meetings and stuff, but it just doesn't work for them. And I'm just like, most of the time when I hear that from somebody, they never got through with the steps. And I'm like the thing that means the most to me about the program is that regardless of the people in it, whether I like them or not, you know, because there's some out there that I don't like. But if I can find like one person that I can trust enough to talk to them and work through all 12 steps with them, the thing works. Like, I know it probably doesn't work for everybody, but whatever. I'm talking. So for me, like, it was like I could watch the changes like in my way of thinking. I could see it happening like as I went through the steps. I was like, you know, having what's I guess called a spiritual awakening, and you know, finding some comfort in being able to pray and not feel like it was bouncing off the wall, feeling like I'm actually getting in touch with a higher power of some sort. I had a really kind of weird, skewed view of that before, and something I wasn't expecting from stopping doing drugs was finding God uh, in a weird roundabout way that, you know, that's not what I was looking for, but there it is. Uh, and, being in recovery has really opened my mind to, because, that's the thing I was hearing a lot coming into it was honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And, I had been kind of raised to be open-minded in a lot of ways, but when it came to God, it was like, this is the way it is, and anything else is patently wrong. And when it was down to getting sober, and I was like, I gotta I gotta do this in a way that's gonna work for me. And I kind of kept mostly sort of the same concept of God as far as like a loving, higher power that wants what's good for me. But it leaves a lot of room there, and I like that quote about God doesn't make too hard of terms for those that seek him. That was really important early on, because I was like, if I went in here with my old preconceptions of God, and I'm talking to like a guy who's really got his program strong and working for him, but I'm just not really sure about his concept of God, and like it kind of would have closed me off to listening to that person. So I kind of tried to keep an open mind about that, and it's worked really well. It's caused me to have to make some uncomfortable decisions. I like to just like let all that stuff be whatever it is back in the day, but I kind of have to be conscious of that stuff now and feel feelings about that stuff. Anyway, recovery's been weird. It's been hard. One thing I'll share about is the first time I went back to work and was in a house with some pills. Was actually alone in this apartment that we were doing like a whole apartment complex, and was alone in this apartment, and there's this bottle of hydrocodone like in a garbage can beside the bathroom. Full bottle, brand new prescription. Somebody just tossed it. Just sitting there on the garbage can. And I'm just like looking at God. I'm like, come on now. Like, I'm like 2 months in maybe. I'm really starting to get into these post-acute Suboxone withdrawals that last forever, and I'm just like real uncomfortable all the time, and I'm like, I'm thinking, is this it? I mean, like, I figured I'd probably relapse eventually, but like, is this what's gonna happen? And I picked up my phone, and of course I got no signal in these apartments, and I'm like, I'm supposed to call this guy, and I can't call the guy. And so I just like, I walked down back out of the apartments. I grabbed a guy that I worked with that kind of knew what was going on, and I was like, look, dude, just come up in here with me till I get this work done, and just kind of stand right there by that garbage can. And he was like, okay. I was like, just please. And so he did it, and that was a real important lesson early on in recovery, was that I don't have to use. Like, that really opened my eyes to that idea that like it wasn't an inevitable thing. Like, that was really hard, and like, but it's a really important part of it for me, because like that's where it opened up for me. I was like, oh, I don't have to. Like, it's not a thing where I have to anymore. And I know that if I decide to, that you know, eventually I'm gonna have to again. So I kind of, when it gets real hard, and like when I'm really having some bad days and thinking about using, I always come back to that like right now I don't have to. It's my choice. I can if I want to, you know. If that's what I want to do with my life, I perfectly well can. It's there for me. But, you know, I don't have to. And that's not something I ever expected to have. So, my throat hurts. I'm done. Thanks, guys.
Straight down the pipe and I feel myself start to fall. What the hell kind of hole have I dug for myself this time? I'll reap what I sow.